What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. Week 18 of the NFL season is upon us. Most fantasy leagues have wrapped up, but still got one more set of bold predictions for you as we finish out the regular season. 5 bold predictions coming your way, and we start with the Atlanta-Carolina matchup. But we're going to say the Atlanta Falcons become the 6th team in a row to rush for at least 200 yards on this very, very porous Panthers defense. So Carolina quietly in the midst of an all-time stretch of bad defense. Like, we've known this is a bad defense, but it's gotten worse over the last month plus. They've allowed at least 200 rushing yards in 5 straight games, something that has not been done in the NFL in over 40 years. The 1981 Patriots were the last defense to accomplish that, and no team has allowed 200 rushing yards in 6 straight games since 1977. So we have history on the line in this Panthers-Falcons matchup, which may not have any other implications depending on what happens in the Bucs-Saints game, which will also be happening in the early window on Sunday. Anyway, last week against the Commanders, Falcons rode Bijan Robinson to a huge first half. I think it would have continued had the Falcons actually possessed the football in the second half. Washington did a great job chewing up clock during their comeback. Atlanta didn't run its 10th play of the second half until about the 4-minute mark in the fourth quarter. So Atlanta only finished that game with 126 rushing yards, but that was heavily influenced by the game script. Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, they were ripping off 5.5 yards per carry on that Washington defense. Even though they'll be scoreboard watching, the Falcons basically have to play this game out as if it matters, and maybe it will. Who knows? Saints could be getting some key veterans back this week. Maybe they make that a game against Tampa Bay. So either way, I think it's pedal to the metal for this Falcons offense. Should be a monster day for Bijan Robinson, perhaps Tyler Algier as well. Keep in mind, in the first meeting between these teams back in week 6, Robinson and Algier combined for exactly 200 yards on 33 carries, and Algier actually led the way with 105 of those yards on 18 attempts. So there we have it. Carolina gives up 200 plus yards for the 6th straight game, and with that will become just the 5th team ever to give up more than 3,000 rushing yards in a season, and the first since 1980 to do that. One other historical note here, by the way, a lot on the line in this game. If the Falcons score at least 38 points, which is very possible, Carolina would set the NFL record for most points allowed in a regular season. All right, bold prediction number 2 for NFL Week 18. Caleb Williams moves up to number 2 all-time in single-season sacks taken. All right, this is something I've been monitoring pretty closely, especially over the last couple of weeks. And right now, Caleb Williams is sitting at 67 sacks in 16 games. So he's 1 behind 2005 David Carr for 3rd on the all-time list. He's 5 behind 1986 Randall Cunningham for 2nd. Now, there's 2002 David Carr, his rookie year in Houston, the first year the Texans existed as an NFL franchise. He's in his own stratosphere. He's holding the belt right now, 76 sacks taken in that season. And keep in mind, he accomplished that in only 16 games. Just unbelievable stuff from David Carr. What a year, what a career he ended up having. Anyway, Caleb would need to be sacked at least 6 times at Lambeau on Sunday to move into 2nd place all time. And I think he can do it. He's done it in multiple games already this season. You know, for as mobile and strong as Caleb Williams is, you have to tip your cap to his ability to find his way into sacks, identify potential sacks. It's like he can almost sense it's coming before it even develops. I mean, really high level stuff that you don't often see from a rookie quarterback. Green Bay got to him 3 times in the first meeting back in week 11, but they only posted about a 15% pressure rate in that game, significantly lower than their season-long figure, which sits in the mid-20s. It was the 2nd lowest pressure rate against Chicago by any team this season. So I think the Packers can improve on that. I know the Packers pass rush has been very much hit or miss this season, but they've had some big sack games against some bad opponents and bad offensive lines. You think back to the Seattle game a few weeks ago. I think Green Bay gets after Caleb Williams. He was sacked 7 times, by the way, last week by that Seahawks team. I'm not going to go as far as to say he'll take 10 sacks and break the all-time record. That would be wild. It'd be very cool, but unlikely. But we'll say he finishes his rookie season number 2 all-time in single-season sacks behind David Carr. All right, next up on the list, we'll go with something a little bit more positive here. And we're going to say Brian Thomas Jr. becomes the 8th player in NFL history to reach 1,300 receiving yards as a rookie. And I know we had a Brian Thomas prediction last week. We're running it back. Look, I'm a Jags fan. All right, we're 4-12. I need this. Brian Thomas is all I have right now when it comes to my football fandom. So with another big game last week against a very good Titans team, a team that has won NFL games this year, we need to keep that in mind. Thomas is now up to 80 catches, 1,179 yards, and 10 touchdowns on the year. With 1 game remaining, he won't have much of a chance to enter the true rarefied air in terms of rookie wide receiver seasons. You know, Nakua, Chase, Jefferson, but he's only 121 yards away from that 1,300-yard plateau. So that would put him around the same class as names like Odell Beckham, Randy Moss, Moss, by the way, had over 1,300 yards on just 69 catches as a rookie, which is just beyond outrageous. But anyway, the Jags match up against the Colts this week. Completely meaningless game in every sense of the word. You know, I suppose there's some draft positioning on the line here for the Jags, who currently would hold the 5th pick, but doesn't really feel like they're prioritizing that with Trevor Lawrence in place. Colts obviously coming off of a devastating loss last week to the New York Giants. Really one of the all-time no-shows in recent memory by a defense, giving up 45 to a Giants team that had not scored more than 22 points in any game except for one this season. That was all the way back early on against Seattle. Colts defense, chances are, won't be as bad this week, but if you give up 45 to Drew Lock, I think all bets are off at this point. Now, we need to keep in mind that Jacksonville's already torched the Colts defense for 37 points, nearly 500 total yards earlier this season. Of course, that was with Trevor Lawrence, but nonetheless, Brian Thomas still at 122 yards in that game on only 5 catches, was kind of one of his early signs that he was emerging this season. He's been targeted at least 10 times now in 5 straight games. He has 59 targets in that span, second in the NFL, behind only Jamar Chase. With nothing to lose here, going up against the 26th ranked pass defense, I like Brian Thomas to put a bow on a monster rookie season, finishing out with over 1,300 yards. All right, we got 2 more bold predictions coming your way. Prediction number 4, Blake Corum finally delivers a big game when fantasy managers need it least. All right, so when it comes to Blake Corum, it's been a season-long saga. I think that's the appropriate word. When the Rams took him out of Michigan, seemed like a potential Kyren Williams replacement. At the very least, someone who would share time in that backfield, trying to reduce the workload for Kyren Williams. Leading up to week 1, we get the report that Kyren Williams was going to be playing special teams. That sent Corum stock into the stratosphere for a few days. I mean, I look back, he went as high as the 7th round in some high-stakes leagues. In terms of average ADP in the NFFC, Corum ended up well ahead of guys like Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins, Bucky Irving. But alas, none of that really mattered. Those who were high on Blake Corum coming into the year really could not have been let down more than they were. Not only did Corum, barely have a role, but Kyren Williams ends up racking up 1,300 yards. He had quite literally the most snaps of any running back in the NFL this season. Corum logged just 56 carries, 62 total touches through the first 16 games of the season. So if you took a chance on Blake Corum, you got. It is what it is. But so did basically the entire fantasy community. So you're not alone here. Anyway, where this is all leading us is to week 18. Rams, Seahawks. It's meaningless for Seattle. They were eliminated this past week. Not technically meaningless for LA. A win here would guarantee them the 3 seed. That would mean matching up with Washington or Green Bay, as opposed to the loser of the Minnesota-Detroit game. But Sean McVay doesn't seem to care about that. He's already said he's prioritizing rest over seeding. He's confirmed that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start at quarterback. It's widely expected that Kyren will see little to no action this week. And McVay himself even said, quote, he's excited about watching Blake Corum get a heavy workload this week. So this will be Blake Corum's first real chance all season to show what he can do. I think he seizes that opportunity. Probably not an overly high volume passing day for the Rams. You just kind of want to get in, get out as healthy as you can. They already have one of the highest run rates in the NFL. We'll say Blake Corum sees 15 to 20 carries, goes up over 100 rushing yards, giving fantasy managers just a taste of what could have been this season. All right, we'll finish out with our 5th and final bold prediction, our final bold prediction of the season. I think it would be bold prediction number 90 on the year. The Minnesota Vikings win outright in Detroit. They take the 1 seed and they take the NFC North. So overall, if you've looked into the week 18 slate, which I'm sure you have, all over the place. We got a handful of meaningful games. We got some draft positioning on the line, but we have very few games that actually matter for both sides. And this is one of those games, arguably the most meaningful game of the entire season. It was a no-brainer to flex this into the Sunday night slot. Winner take all, NFC North title, 15-win season, 1 seed in the NFC. All of that is on the line on Sunday night in Detroit. Lions are currently holding as a 2.5, 3-point favorite, depending where you look, which makes sense. They're at home. They just put 40 on the Niners. They've won at Minnesota earlier this season already. Even without David Montgomery, this Lions offense continues to feel unstoppable. More Jahmyr Gibbs, not necessarily a bad thing for the Lions. There's a reason the total in this game is up to 57. That would be easily the highest in the NFL this season. But the injuries on defense, that's a bigger concern right now for Detroit. They gave up 475 yards to the Niners last week, almost 400 to the Chicago Bears in week 16, 559 to the Buffalo Bills in week 15. When you're putting up 34 to 42 points every week, I guess you can survive that way. But I think the Lions, they run into some roadblocks this week against that Brian Flores defense that completely shut down the Green Bay Packers for the first 3.5 quarters of that game last week. They're up to number 1 in defensive EPA on the year. I think the Vikings will have no trouble moving the ball on this depleted Lions defense. Ultimately, this is a game that I see playing out pretty similarly to what we saw in Niners-Lions this past Monday night. But this time around, I don't think Detroit quite finishes it out. I think Minnesota goes into Ford Field. They cap off one of the all-time improbable seasons with a win to lock up the number 1 seed and position themselves just 2 home victories away from a Super Bowl berth.